Welcome back, boxing fans. You know, if you watch boxing, you know there's radical boxing fans out there. People that will latch onto things specifically because of race, because of nationality. We see this from boxing fans from around the world, I'm sure, but obviously America, it seems far more highlighted. Maybe because most of it's done in English, so I understand it. Whereas what's going on outside of America maybe is being done in a different language that goes over my head. Anything is possible. The funny thing is, yesterday I made a video ridiculing somebody's terrible or base racially biased pound for pound list. And so he came out with a new edition just an hour ago, literally changing his predictions. And you know what's funny? He probably thinks that by doing this, he's really stirring the pot and really making people angry. But that's far from the truth. The truth of the situation is you're exposing your double standard and your racial bias every time you make one of these videos. That's all you're doing. Like, you're not proving to any real boxing fan that your list is justified. Because if it was, you might be able to actually come out and justify it. But whenever you do that, you embarrass yourself. Because you give one fighter praise for doing something that you don't give another fighter praise for doing, right? And we've seen this before, literally praising Tank Davis from jumping from 130 to 140 to fight Mario Barros. Whereas Nui jumped up from 108 to 115 to fight Navarez, a long reigning world champion, a legitimate world champion who had made over 10 title defenses. The only loss on his resume at that time was when he moved up to 118 and took on pound for pound fighter Nonito Donaire and didn't get knocked out, went the distance and lost in a very uninteresting fight. He really gave Donaire a lot of problems, really showed that, Donaire had problems adjusting to a guy who was really defensive and a very slick boxer. Inouye did that, jumped up 2 weight divisions to take on this fighter that went the distance with Donaire and fucking blew him away, destroyed him, making a huge statement to become a two-weight world champion at that point. But Tank Davis was praised for jumping up 2 weight divisions. And what Inouye did, maybe it's out of ignorance. Maybe this guy just doesn't know. I would probably chalk it up to that, stupidity and ignorance. But it also could just be bias and hate, right? He loves to point to other fight boxing channels and boxing fans and make it out that everybody hates this guy. Never, ever on my channel have you ever heard me say that I hate any boxer from anywhere in the world. Never have you heard that. Not even about Floyd Mayweather, right? Never have you ever heard me make those kind of statements. But on the other hand, I've heard him make those kind of statements on multiple occasions, right? But this guy is so blinded by hate, racial bias, that he comes out with these lists and he thinks what he's doing must really have a lot of legitimacy to it, right? And that somebody must actually pay attention to it. But the truth is, if I didn't talk about it, probably nobody would even be watching it. So you're welcome very much. But let's look at this list. Top 10 elite fighters list, Floyd Mayweather in the title. And the irony is, yes, okay, you're going to put Floyd Mayweather there. But then again, this is you being disrespectful. Because guys like this are like LeBron James fans, right? That think for some reason LeBron James is the best thing that ever happened to basketball. And they totally have no concept of what came before LeBron James. No idea, right? And this is like Floyd Mayweather fans. They have no concept that anything actually ever happened historically in boxing before there was Floyd Mayweather, right? It was like, and then God created boxing, and then God created Floyd Mayweather. No, no, hardly. But let's get to this list. Of course, we all know who's going to be pound for pound number 1 on his list. He didn't call this a pound for pound list. He called it an elite fighters list. You should just call it what it is, a fanboy list, right? Because that's what it is. Just because you changed a few names, really you changed names just to make more of a disrespectful statement, because that's what you're doing. Saying that I can't be cowed to, I can't be dictated to. I'm not picking people you want me to pick, even though people can justify why these so-called people should be on the list. But okay. So at number one, no surprise, Bud Crawford. And I have no problem anybody putting Bud Crawford pound for pound number one. The problem I have is when people talk about, this is my preference. I prefer Bud Crawford because of this, 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 and that. And I'll be like, okay. So if that's your preference, then this guy can prefer Usyk. And this guy can prefer Inouye. And this guy can prefer Canelo. Because it's their preference as well. The only problem is when we talk about preference, there's a certain group of Americans that feel that their preference should get preferential treatment, and everybody else's preference is based on racism, right? And that's where you lose the plot. That's where you don't really have an argument when now you're not letting people have a preference. You're allowed to have a preference, but nobody else is allowed to have a preference, or else you're going to have issues with their preference. Even though when I talk about Inouye, Usyk, and Crawford all being in that sort of first level of the pound for pound list or the elite boxers list, it's based on what they've literally done in the ring that has never been done before. All three of them, are literally two-weight undisputed champions. And we remember how significant this undisputed champion thing was. We remember when Bud Crawford beat Julius Ndongo. And based on beating Julius Ndongo and being the only undisputed fighter in boxing, a huge movement came out on YouTube, primarily from Black American YouTube channels, that tried to force this square peg into a round hole and tell everybody else, no, the only person that should be pound for pound number one now is Bud Crawford, because he's literally the only undisputed champion in boxing. And because of that, he deserves the credit he warrants. And if this was a criteria they stuck by and consistently used, then there's not much argument I could have. I would say, okay, that's how this guy judges his pound for pound list. You can see consistently he does this with every fighter that goes on to become undisputed. Ironically enough, that's not true. When Usyk became undisputed, he was not propelled into the pound for pound number one list. A lot of guys did not even have him in the pound for pound top 5. But yet he did what Bud Crawford had previously done. He was literally the only fighter at that time who was undisputed. And then Josh Taylor became undisputed and did it in a much more impressive way than Bud Crawford. Even Usyk did it in a much more impressive way than Crawford. Usyk beat 3 world champions and then went back and beat the lineal champion to make a statement. Taylor beat Regis Prograis in a tournament and then ended up facing the other unified champion to collect all the belts, right? So it was both very impressive ways to become undisputed, and they did it, and yet neither of them were catapulted into the number one position on the pound for pound list. So what that tells you is people have a preference, or should I say a blatant bias, that when it's a Black American fighter, he'll be given special preference. When it's a non-Black American fighter, he'll be given no preference at all. Actually, he might even be punished because of his accolades. Example, Inouye, and you'll find out later about this list. Because becoming undisputed catapulted Devin Haney number 2. Becoming undisputed catapulted Charlo top 5. But Inouye couldn't even become top 5, and he's become an undisputed champion in 2 weight divisions. Right? So this shows you there's no consistency when people make these lists. It's all based on fanboyism, on racial bias, right? Because when I make my list, I'm not making a list based on racial bias. I'll put Bud Crawford number one because, in truth, I feel it's Crawford and Nui Usyk. You could put either one of those three fighters into the number one position, and there's not much I can say. I could justify all three of them being in that position, right? Obviously, Canelo at this point, no, he fell through because he lost to Bivol. If he beats Bivol in a rematch, then potentially, okay, I could then once again see him potentially being in that position. But it'd be hard to overcome Nui, Usyk, and Crawford, who at this point are all undefeated, all two-weight undisputed champions. Maybe if Canelo went up to 175 and beat the winner of Beterbiev and Bivol to become a two-weight undisputed champion and beating a pound-for-pound top 10 fighter like that, then at that point I'd be like, hold up, now we can talk. But that's quite a big expectation, right? For Canelo Alvarez to beat the winner of Bivol and Beterbiev to become a two-weight undisputed champion by moving up to his fourth weight division. I know he won a title previously, but nonetheless, we could say that it wasn't against a fighter that was as good as Beterbiev and Bivol currently are. Whereas I see a lot of people putting Tank Davis into the top 2 and 3 pound-for-pound position right now. Yet this is a guy who literally has never unified titles at any weight division, ever. So when you compare what he's done to guys like Usyk, Crawford, and Nui, and maybe potentially Canelo, there's no comparison. The only thing that could justify him being on a list above any of those three fighters is strictly based on racial bias. It's not based on actual accomplishments, right? But Bud Crawford, number one. And as I say, I have no problem with Bud Crawford, number one. If you put Bud on your list, you won't hear me moan about it. Bud is a bad, bad man. Number two, Alexander Usyk. Even Bud Crawford has Usyk number one. That says something. Usyk did what these guys like to talk about when they talk about the eye test, right? Well, if they were the same size, this guy would obviously beat this guy. Well, Usyk did that, but he wasn't even at the same size. He literally just beat Tyson Fury, a guy who was 6 inches taller, 8 inches longer, 50 pounds heavier. He was not the same size. If he was the same size, he would have fucking beat the shit out of Fury and knocked his ass out cold. He almost did that already, even though he was coming from such a long distance behind him. So he did what people praise fighters for doing, but literally he did it without actually being the same size. He literally fought the boogeyman. He was, what is it? Who's the guy that throws the rock and hits the dude? Something in Goliath? David. He literally was David in that fight. David and Goliath had all the advantages going against him, yet was still able to win. But even in doing that, he doesn't get much credit. And now people talk about, well, Crawford shouldn't fight Canelo because that would be unfair. Why do people want Crawford to fight Canelo? They just want him to get beat. Yet Crawford moving up to fight Canelo, he wouldn't be giving up that much advantages. He would still be the taller fighter, the longer fighter. He might be a little lighter in the ass than Canelo, but with better footwork and more range, that shouldn't really matter. Because a slow-footed not volume puncher, but counter puncher, isn't necessarily going to be in position to use his physicality against you. And we've literally seen Canelo Alvarez fight Floyd Mayweather. And he was much bigger than Floyd as well. Yet he didn't use size as an advantage at all in that fight, right? Whereas we've seen Tyson Fury use his size and reach and natural advantages to his advantage when he beat many fighters. Obviously, Deontay Wilder is an example. But okay, Usyk at number two. So far, so good. So far, I can't complain about this list. It looks beautiful. Excellent. Canelo Alvarez now at number three. Before, I think Canelo was at number 5. number 6 on the list. But now Canelo's at number 3. I can't be angry having Canelo up there, but the problem is he did just get beat by Dimitri Bivol. And once again, for some reason, Dimitri Bivol is not on this top 10 pound for pound list. So the guy that beat Canelo Alvarez isn't the pound for pound top 10 fighter. The same guy that beat Zurdo Ramirez, who was a champion at 168, moved up to 175, got his ass handed to him by Bivol, and then went up to cruiserweight and became a world champion in his second fight at that weight, and is now currently a 2-weight world champion. But that Dimitri Bivol doesn't deserve to be on the pound for pound list, even at number 9 or 10. But Canelo, coming off of a loss, I mean, obviously a while ago, but to Bivol, he is at number 3. At number 3. And as I said, I have no problem pushing Canelo up the list if he did things that were really impressive. Example, beat the winner of Beterbiev and Bivol. You do that, and then you easily justify a number 3 rank on this list. Easily. As I said, if not number 1. But you would definitely put him in the top 3 because that would be unprecedented. Right? Him joining Usyk, Inoue, and Crawford as the only undisputed fighters in 2 weight divisions, that would be fucking insane. And I don't think that Canelo potentially won't take on that opponent. But I don't really see him winning that fight, regardless of who he faces. But taking on the opponent, that fucking is pretty impressive in itself. I would definitely think that definitely shows something. At number 4, Jerome Boots Ennis. See, that's why I say, this guy is just making this list trying to make people angry and thinking that him putting Boots Ennis on the list somehow is going to make people angry. No, it just exposes you as a clown. That's all it does. Because while all of us think Boots Ennis is a great fighter, he's literally not beaten a world champion yet. Well, we all think Boots Ennis is a great fighter. At this point, he hasn't proven that. So it's premature to put him on a pound for pound list, right? But yet I'm one of the guys that says, just let him clean out the 147 division. There's good opponents there. He doesn't need to headhunt big name opponents at this point of his career. He can beat Stanionis. He could beat Howard. He could beat Barrios, become undisputed at 147, potentially take on Ryan Garcia, get a big name, sort of put him on the pound for pound list of top name fighters that sell in America, and then move up to 154, try to become a 2-weight world champion. At that time, he would definitively be in the top 10 pound for pound list, even though he hasn't fought any elite fighters yet, but just becoming undisputed, beating good fighters in the process. That would say a lot, right? And I'm sure if his performances were kick ass, that would only help elevate him even more. I like Boots Ennis. The irony is this guy doesn't like Boots Ennis. He's jumping on Boots Ennis's bandwagon now because Boots Ennis is a Black American. And he knows if he doesn't jump on now, he's going to look ridiculous when he jumps on later and tries to use Boots Ennis as a way to shit on every non-Black American fighter who's doing well in the sport. Because that's the only reason he's actually saying anything to him. He thinks Speedy Rashidi Ellis is better than fucking Boots Ennis. We saw the videos. And then Tank Davis at number 5. In truth, I don't really have a problem with Tank Davis being at number 5, even though I think he probably should be 6. I don't think he's in front of Canelo. I don't think he's in front of Inoue. So that would be 4. And I think really Demetrius Bivol probably should be ahead of him. But if you had him ahead of Bivol and Bivol just behind him, I couldn't really be that angry because he is dynamic, exciting, one of the most exciting fighters in boxing today. I mean, what's not to like? Tank Davis is even showing a lot more personality now, which is definitely a good thing. He's definitely far more entertaining coming out of his shell, and fucking with Floyd out of the picture, even better, right? It just allows Tank Davis to sell himself and not have Floyd Mayweather try to take the shine away from him. So in truth, I don't mind Tank Davis being here at number 5, but think about how he's gotten on this list. Let me just look at this statement that somebody put, one of my subs did on my channel. Where is it? Where is it? Somebody broke down the odds from Vegas on Tank Davis's last 4 or 5 opponents, right? John wanted to point out that his last 4 opponents are 76-1. But that doesn't mean anything when you haven't fought anybody, right? Frank Martin never fought a top 10 fighter. Cruz, before he fought Tank Davis, had never fought a top 10 fighter. Garcia fought one top 10 fighter in Luke Campbell, and literally this guy shit all over Luke Campbell. So you sort of discrediting the most creditable win on Tank Davis's resume. And then Garcia, that came up from 130, he came up from 130. You literally pulled the dude up in weight. But this guy talked about the Vegas odds. I can't see where that statement is. I don't know. As I say, I'm getting older. I can't see. But one of my subs, you can find the comments probably on my other video from yesterday. He broke it down, gave the odds, and showed that Tank Davis literally has fought all guys that he was favored to beat easily, even Frank Martin, right? He was not favored to be struggling or have problems with any of the guys he fought. And in turn, he didn't. He beat them all easily because they're not high-level fighters. It doesn't mean they're garbage. It doesn't mean they're shit. Nobody's saying that. No one's trying to disrespect his resume. Even in my video that I had a pile of shit on the screen, that goes more towards his fanboys than Tank Davis himself. We're hoping what Tank Davis and people are saying now is true, even though it's a bit late and it's a bit of a aging out. But still, fighting Lomachenko in November, as I hear, is a possibility. That would still be a great fight for Tank Davis. A great fight. And if he would follow that up by fighting Shakur Stevenson, if he beats Lomachenko, there could be no questioning Tank Davis as the best fighter at 135 and a pound-for-pound top 5 fighter in the sport. But you still need to do it. You need to actually fight those fighters, and you need to win. And until you do it, we can't give you credit just because you got a lot of tattoos and you come from Baltimore. Next, we have Devin Haney. Devin Haney dropped down from number 2 to number 6. But again, there's nothing Devin Haney has done in his career that allows him to be above Bivol or Inouye or better BF. Oh, yes, he was undisputed. But as we already showed, being undisputed doesn't really mean anything. Because if it did, Inouye would have been mentioned already. Because literally, he's a 2-weight undisputed champion. Right? So we know that don't mean shit. It's used to highlight certain fighters when you're looking for a way to praise them. But it's not a consistent marker of excellence, right? It's just cherry-picked based on the fighter and primarily the color of the fighter. And I have nothing bad to say about Devin Haney. Devin Haney fought Loma, fought Ryan, even though we know that was a cherry pick to try to get a big pay-per-view. It backfired on him, and really he walks away damaged property. I mean, that's what he is, and the LDBC is having a hard time trying to sell that property now, and fucking Tank Davis fans are loving it because there was the Errol Spence, Bud Crawford back and forth, and just like Bud Crawford beat Errol Spence's ass, Ryan Garcia beating the crap out of Devin Haney really helps Tank Davis fanboys to push their narrative, even though obviously it wasn't Tank Davis that won. But we saw what Tank Davis did to Ryan Garcia, and then we saw what Ryan Garcia did to Devin Haney. And even if you want to bring up steroids or whatever, it don't matter. Those images are still etched in our minds. We saw his chin. Literally, I heard Paulie Malignaggi, Tim Bradley, Chris Algieri, and one other guy on that show, Pro Box, talking about Devin Haney and potentially making fights with Tank Davis. And it was funny because literally they said they don't know if they really want to see Loma fight him because Loma doesn't really have the power. They say the fight they really want to see is Shakur Stevenson. But Shakur's got less power than Lomachenko. And then, of course, they said, we don't really want to see Devin Haney, maybe Teofimo Lopez, because he's explosive and has power, but Devin Haney's got no chin. So literally, that's boxers. And that's what they're saying after that fight. So that tells you a lot of what public opinion is and speculation. So you can put Devin Haney number 6, but the truth is, Devin Haney literally just got his ass handed to him by a fighter you literally said was garbage. And no matter how things play out, we're still all going to remember Devin Haney getting his ass beat. And we can still all go back and watch that fight and literally watch it again and again and again and again. Next, Teofimo Lopez. I like Lopez. Lopez, truthfully, probably should be the first fighter to actually have been undisputed in 2 weight divisions. But because of the politics of boxing, he got fucked over at both 135 and 140. But his wins over Lomachenko and his wins over Taylor, 2 fighters that were seen as pound-for-pound fighters when he fought them. Oh, maybe not. Oh, no, yeah. Still, at that point, you could still credit both of them as pound-for-pound fighters. Him going in and winning those fights and looking as impressive as he did in both performances was significant. Obviously, him losing to Kambosos was definitely a banana peel that sort of gets in the way of putting him on pound-for-pound lists and praising him. And then obviously see him fight Ortiz, a guy that we know is good because we saw Lomachenko struggle with him. People criticized and shit all over Lomachenko for struggling with him. But then we saw Lopez struggle with him as well, even though some people tried to dismiss and downplay that opponent. But truth is truth. We saw what we saw. At this point, if he's on a pound-for-pound list, okay. I mean, I'm not against having him on the list, but there's definitely fighters that deserve to be on this list above Teofimo Lopez easily. Unless you're punch drunk boxing, and then he's top 5. Beterbiev on the list. Beterbiev should be on the list. Literally, he's got a 100% knockout ratio. So if Tank Davis is on this list at number 4, because of his exciting KOs and dominant performances, well, then Beterbiev sure as hell should be there as well, because he's just as exciting, has just as much power, has a better knockout ratio with a 100% KO ratio, and has fought way better opposition. And actually fought champions and unified titles, something that Tank Davis has yet to do. Not to say he will never do it, but we're hoping that comes faster than it's previously been coming around. And then if Beterbiev fucking knocks out Bivol, I mean, by not having Bivol on this list, you're kind of disrespecting Beterbiev, because he should be fighting a top 10 pound-for-pound fighter, and that should be elevating him in probably to the top 5 above Canelo Alvarez, and sure as hell above Tank Davis. Behind Usyk, Inoue, and Crawford, then you should have Beterbiev right there. Bam Rodriguez makes the list. He should make the list. Obviously, I think probably lower at this point, but he's fighting Juan Francisco Estrada next in what should be a fucking great fight, an historical legacy fight. If he beats Juan Francisco Estrada the way Pro Box was talking today, many of whom were predicting he was going to stop Estrada, something that's never happened, that would be fucking unbelievable. And at that point, you could easily put him at this position on the pound-for-pound list, because being a 2-weight world champion, beating a future Hall of Famer, and doing it in the way he potentially can do it, and the way people are predicting him to do it, that would be impressive. That would be super impressive. And as I say, his last performance really, really impressed me. He's had some performances that were not as impressive. Coming off of the Quadras and Rungvisai fight, he had one fight that was kind of disappointing, but he's bounced back with a fucking stellar performance. And we'll see what he does against Estrada. That is truly going to be the litmus test for how good Bam Rodriguez truly is. And being an American, people should be supporting him, and super exciting as well. He's also a super exciting fighter. But unlike Tank, he's much higher volume. Not the KO knockout artist that Tank is, much more of a volume puncher who through accumulation stops people, but super impressive. The North American Mexican version of Lomachenko. Then Shakur Stevenson. Yeah, as I said last time, I have no problem with Shakur being on the list, but there are fighters who've done more than Shakur. And we can't say that Shakur has looked so impressive in performances because actually he's looked disappointing in many performances. You find just Black American YouTubers, many of whom are super critical. I was looking at the Pro Box video today, and tons of people were shitting all over fucking Shakur, Black Americans, right? Talking about how he's boring, using the same narrative that we heard many people use historically to downplay slick defense first by boxers. And as people say, use those excuses to duck these fighters and not put their fighter in against those kind of fighters. There's some truth to it, but there's also some truth that if you did a Shakur Stevenson Tank Davis fight, it might not be exciting. As Paulie said, though, that's only the case if Shakur wins. If Tank wins, the fight could be very exciting, right? For me, I think Shakur is good, but he has been inconsistent. You come off a win against the Japanese fighter, you look fucking pound for pound top 5. Then you come off of a win against De Los Santos, and you look like you're lucky to be fucking pound for pound top fucking 20, right? Now you're taking on a bum-ass German dude who's coming off of a loss to Frank Martin, and that win isn't really going to impress anybody any more than fucking Lopez's win against the bum-ass Canadian is going to impress anyone, any more that fucking Boots Ennis's performance against the bum-ass Canadian would have really proved anything for him. They're good, stay busy fights. You got to fucking stay busy. You got to fight people. But none of those 3 fights are the kind of fight that really impresses anyone. And the dude at 130, the WBA champion, his next opponent, I don't even know who that fucking guy is. Literally, some Irish guy, but I've never fucking heard of him before. I don't even know if that guy's ranked in the top 15 by the WBA. I never saw his name. But, you know. Honorable mention. Honorable mention is like I said, and this is where I think people need to be fair and consistent. There's probably about 15 fighters that all potentially could be on the pound for pound top 10 list based on what they've been doing, what great victory they just came off of, or what piss poor performance they came off of, which could rise and lower fucking boxers. And people being so attached through race and nationality, they're afraid to let fighters drop off the list based on poor performances and afraid to elevate fighters coming off of great performances. Yet that can go back and forth easily. Ioka fought Tanaka, great performance. Should have been pound for pound, top 10 for sure. And then fought Bam Rodriguez's brother, arguably lost the fight and should have definitely dropped off the pound for pound list. He dropped off of my list, came back, beat him in the rematch. That potentially would push him back up, but not as high as he was after the Tanaka win. And now he's fighting who? He's fighting somebody. Unification fight with the Argentinian fighter, which would elevate him further up the pound for pound list. And then if he was to fight the winner of Estrada, Bam Rodriguez, winning that potentially could put him fucking top 5 because he would become a 3-belt unified champion at 115 pounds, beating 1, 2, 3 world champions to claim those titles. And in truth, he should have had the WBO belt, but he ducked Nakatani, which probably slides him to number 7 on the list instead of top 5 because he could have potentially been undisputed. But, guys like that, don't get attention because they're not based in America. They're not black enough. They don't talk with a Baltimore accent, right? They don't wear their jeans down low with their underwear up high. They just don't have the swag to get people's attention like some people love everything that's American. And it's understandable that you support America, but understand that boxing is global. Maybe we should give love to everybody and not just the people that look like us. So Dmitry Bivol on this list, you'd have to say number 11. Number 11. Number 11. I don't see how Shakur, Lopez, Bam Rodriguez, any of those three fighters. There's probably somebody else as well on the list. Should be above him. None of them should be. Then Vasily Lomachenko. I mean, this is what I said again. Rise and fall, right? You come off of piss poor performances, your status drops. You come off of a good performance and your status rises. I heard people on that same podcast saying Lomachenko's better now than he's ever been. Come on, grow up. Everybody knows that's not true. He's 37 years old. He's definitely not better than he fucking ever has been. But he's still good enough to beat the majority of fighters at 135 pounds. But the question is he good enough to beat Tank Davis and Shakur Stevenson? Those are two very tough fighters to overcome. I saw people also criticize him because, well, he loses all his big step-up fights. No, well, he beat Rigo. He beat Gary Russell. He beat Linares. He beat Walters. He beat plenty of elite fighters. He beat Petraza, who literally is probably the best victory on Tank Davis's resume. So if that's Tank Davis's best resume, it's probably number 4 or 5 on Lomachenko's. So what does that tell you? Right? So, Lomachenko definitely is a pound-for-pound quality fighter, but he is 37 years old, just like Beterbiev is 39, right? These guys are destined to fade away soon because age eventually catches up to everybody. O'Shaquie Foster. I ain't hating on O'Shaquie Foster, but the best win O'Shaquie Foster has in his resume is when he fought a guy coming up to his 4th weight division, kind of like when Tank Davis beat Santa Cruz, who came up to his 4th weight division. Santa Cruz had no power. When he was in his 4th weight division, Tank was in his original division. O'Shaquie in his original division, fighting a guy who came up to his 4th division. So it's hard to give a guy tons of credit for beating a guy who came up multiple weight classes. It's kind of how people don't really give Lomachenko so much credit for beating Rigo, because Rigo came up to his 3rd division to take on fucking Lomachenko. It's not Loma's fault. Loma was going to fight him when he was champion at 126. Rigo's the one that walked away from that contract. But people don't want to tell you the truth, but I will. But O'Shaquie Foster, at this point, he got a lot to do, man. He never unified titles. He's looked really like he went to war with fighters that aren't that good. His last 2 opponents both gave him very good fights, yet neither of them are elite fighters. Abraham Nova and then the dude fucking Hernandez or Fernandez or whoever he was. Literally nobody really knew who that fucking guy was. He hadn't beaten anybody, right? Ray Vargas is by far the best win on his resume, but Ray Vargas is not a hard puncher, arguably just got beat by a domestic UK fighter at 26 pounds, right? So the question is, how good is O'Shaquie Foster really? I think he could beat probably everybody at 130, but you got to fight him. And then a Nui underneath of O'Shaquie Foster. Like, just ask yourself this question. And the funny thing is, John used to say that a Nui was his favorite fighter. But this is how disrespectful you are. This guy literally destroyed the fighter you predicted was going to beat him. A fighter who's very similar to O'Shaquie Foster in Stephen Fulton. A fighter who, like Tank Davis, had beaten tons of undefeated fighters. And if you look at his last 8 opponents, the record fucking was very low in losses and very high in wins. But when push came to shove, he got his ass knocked the fuck out. And now he is at number 14, 15 on this list, which, you ain't making me angry because I know your lists are full of shit. That's why I'm fucking mocking and ridiculing you, right? And everybody that listens to my video now learns about how biased you are or how stupid you are when it comes to boxing, that you obviously just don't know fucking anything, right? And it could be one or it could be the other. but either one isn't really a good look. And then last, number 15, Charlo. It's true, you should drop Charlo out of the top 10 because the dude's been inactive, currently doesn't have any fucking titles, and is coming off of a fucking embarrassing performance against Canelo Alvarez, where he fucking got dropped and then just tried to survive. And then last but not least, Tyson Fury. Even though in truth, heavyweight shouldn't be on the list. Usyk's not a heavyweight. He's a 2-weight world champion who apparently is going to go back down to cruiserweight, which would be fucking off the hook. If he does that, enough praise, enough fucking respect for Usyk for doing that. Something we haven't really seen anyone do in history. Fury, obviously good, but he's also coming off of a loss. A loss where I think he can win the rematch. So we'll see what happens when that fight happens in November. I am predicting that Fury is going to beat Usyk in the rematch. So you can see I'm not a fanboy of Usyk, and I'm not a fanboy of Fury. I don't really support either one of them, but you got to be honest. You got to break boxing down, not through bias, race, or nationality, but based on reality, based on facts and truth. But this is John's new pound for pound list, or top 10 elite fighters. Take it for what it is. It's really a load of shit. But who's surprised? Let's look at this list. Excuse me. Holy crapola. Here we go. So here are Ring Magazine's pound for pound list. And people like to discredit Ring Magazine's list. And in truth, I don't think you can really discredit their list because their list is not based on one person's bias. It's based on an accumulation of people and their individual bias, which gives everybody points, which are then tallied to create the list, right? So according to their list right now, Usyk is number 1, Inui's number 2, Crawford is number 3. I know for some people this is going to really anger them, but the truth is this is not disrespectful about Crawford because he's not number fucking 14 on Ring Magazine's list, right? At number 4, Canelo Alvarez, and in truth, that's how my list is broken down. But as I say, you can move 1, 2, or 3 any way you want. I don't think you're wrong. I definitely think that Better BF and Bivol deserve to be 5 and 6. Maybe you could move Tank Davis, as I said, to number 6 and Bivol to number 7. Hold on, I'm going to blow my nose. But of course, when I put Tank Davis up there, I'm probably a bit of a, slave of the moment, something of the moment. Obviously, after seeing Tank Davis's brilliant performance this weekend, I'm probably over ranking Tank Davis as well. Because if we just look at what they've done, he in truth doesn't really deserve to be ahead of Bivol or Better BF. But he definitely deserves to be a fucking head of Errol Spence, who should not be anywhere on this list. You should probably put Tank Davis at number 7, Lomachenko at number fucking 8. And then this November, we'd be having the number 7 versus the number 8 pound for pound fighters matching up in unification, which would be a fucking great fight. Great fight. Then, of course, you have Bam Rodriguez at number 9 and Junto Nakatani at number 10. And I understand Junto Nakatani isn't getting respect from some people because he is Japanese. The only Japanese person on somebody's list was ranked like number 13 or 14, being a little disrespectful. So you don't expect them to have Ioka, Junto Nakatani, obviously Ken Shiro or fighters like that anywhere close to the pound for pound list. But when you look at Junto Nakatani, 27-0, 20 KOs, currently a 3-weight world champion. He's done the exact same thing that Shakur Stevens has done. But unlike Shakur, he hasn't unified any titles yet. But he also has had some spectacular knockouts. So if you're going to be rating Tank Davis based on spectacular knockouts, then you probably should be giving Junta Nakatani similar kudos because he looks like a monster. He looks like he's easily the best fighter at bantamweight. It's just a matter of him now fighting those other champions and trying to become undisputed like a Nui, and then potentially moving up to his 4th weight division to take on a Nui. And tell me that wouldn't be a great fight. Number 2 versus number 10. It would easily be the biggest fight in Japanese history. That shit would be fucking unbelievable. And that just shows you the fact that Japan is this close to potentially having the biggest boxing match in the history of Japanese boxing. And true, Japanese boxing didn't really start until the 50s, right? After obviously World War II, when America introduced both baseball and boxing to Japan. But you look over this short period of history and how well Japan has developed both in baseball and in boxing. They've done great, right? Some of the best baseball players in the world, the best team in the world, beat America to win, and some of the best boxers in the world. On this pound-for-pound top 10 list, currently there are 2. And there's a couple others that should be given some sort of notice as well. But as I say, I'm not trying to fanboy any ethnicity. I'm just thinking that, obviously some people would think Shakur should be here. Other people would think Junta Nakatani would be there. Some people may be thinking Lomachenko is here. Some people may feel somebody else is there. Because that's the thing, as I said, there's easily 15 fighters in the sport of boxing who potentially could be on this list, right? And it's just a matter of preference. What's your preference? And if you use your preference, I hope at least you're doing it from an unbiased, non-racially biased perspective. That's all I'm saying. I think Ring Magazine's list is great. Get Spence off that list, put Lomachenko or Shakur Stevenson on that list, and I think there's not much criticism you could actually throw towards that list. Obviously, Tio is also close. Let's see what Tio does. If he is to beat Devin Haney for unification, Devin Haney as well. Bounce back with a victory like that. He's also on the list. Bounce back with a significant victory, and you're right back fucking on that list, right back into contention as one of the best 10 fighters in boxing. The onus is on you. What are you going to do as a boxer? It's not about fucking fanboys and dick riders and racial trolls. It's about literally what the boxers do in the ring. But leave your comments below. Thanks for watching. And remember to like, subscribe, and share. And let me know what's good about this list, what's good about that list, what's bad, and tell me who should be on your list or isn't on your list, and vice versa. Thanks for watching.